What's up, folks? So I don't chase every single conspiracy theory that I come across all the way down the rabbit hole. I admit I look into a lot of them, especially if the person who shows me the quote-unquote conspiracy theory is quote-unquote reputable, has clarity of mind, is a stable, steady deliverer of good material, right? So it depends on where I'm hearing it. Depends on how many times I hear it. But this one in particular, first time I heard it, I didn't even look into it. I didn't even look into it at all, right? Saw it again and again and again. Reputable people. So I looked into it, right? I looked into it a little bit, right? Not a lot, but then I took a flight and I was noticing some things around the airport, and I was looking into some things, where the flight came from, where it was going, and the schedules around the flight and whatnot. And I think I've come to a conclusion, right? So, I mean, when you look into these things, or when I look into these things, I like to think of a good detective, right? A good detective doesn't just get to the house of the murder scene, right? He just comes through the door and the wife's murdered, and there's the guy or whatever, and he's like, well, the guy did it, right? Because the guy was around, and you know what? There's blood right there, and so that's that. Case closed, right? Now, a good detective follows the evidence. You follow the evidence, no matter how, unsettling it is, and no matter where it leads, right? And most of the rabbit holes and most of the evidence to all of these quote-unquote conspiracy theories are unsettling, okay? Because, cognitive dissonance, right? You've been lied to. Nobody wants to think we're being lied to literally 24/7 about everything. The term conspiracy theory itself was invented and pushed by the CIA after the Kennedy murders, because, and here's the guy, Kennedy, who came out and said, there are secret societies that are running the world, and that can't happen, and the CIA must be dismantled. And a week later, right, they did them. So that's, and man, people love the term. They love the term conspiracy theory because they just get to sleep nicely, right? You can just write it off, and you can just marginalize whatever you hear, right? It's kind of like calling someone crazy, because then you just they just become marginalized immediately. You don't have to listen to what they're saying. You don't have to worry about it, You can just go to sleep or stay asleep, as it were, right? But, the people running the whole show, and the people who run all the universities and teach all the information, these are the same people. These are the people in the secret societies, right? So nobody wants to believe that they're lying about everything, right? Because it's your world. You'd like to think that people who are running it actually care about you in some way, shape, or form. I mean, to the extremes, we have these people who worship politics on the left and the right. And these politicians, they literally put them up on pedestals and worship them, right? Like the C parts when they come walking down the street, can I touch you, get your autograph or whatever, And I'm here telling you these people are freaking liars and thieves and Satanists. Above all that, right? Satanists. So it's a lot to deal with, but that's where the evidence goes. If you follow it, right? Without prejudice. Just put all your thoughts aside and just follow the evidence. Alright, so this one is the jet fuel hoax. Alright? This was actually pretty cool. And no one gets hurt, right? So it's not like talking about satanic rituals of the elite. When they hit you with the alien propaganda garbage? That there's infinite, or just tons of galaxies and planets, and there's going to be life that comes here, and how they do it in all the movies, and But the one thing I like about that is when they say that this universal language that we'll all be able to speak is math. That'll be like how we can construct a bridge of communication. I love using math, and depending on the amount of cognitive dissonance with somebody I'm dealing with that I'm trying to convince them of something using math, I've seen like guys, like physicists, actually getting to the point they're cornered with the math. There's just no way they can get out of this. And I have this paper, right? Because I was like arguing something back and forth with this guy, self-styled scientist, and I mean he's a scientist for a living. But I've got the paper. I told him that A equals B equals C, and he said no, it doesn't. And I said, well, do it with these equations. Use math and show me. And I have the piece of paper. He starts writing. He starts doing the equations, and he's signing, co-signing, and all this stuff. And his handwriting just gets shakier and shakier. Got to the point where he just sort of crumbled it up a little bit, pushed it aside, and said that he can't figure it out with math. And it was really interesting to see his thought processes and how it, his biology and all the stresses he was going through, and how it culminated into him just achieving maximum cognitive dissonance. And then it just ended. And I would never have even approached this guy. But one day I was standing out front of work, and he overheard me talking to somebody else, somebody who I could communicate like this to. And but it was too late. He had heard it, and so I had to tell him about it. And then once I told him about it, he kind of flipped out. And, in reality, it's almost like the more letters someone has after their name, and the more time they spent in school, and the harder it is to get through to them. They've invested time, energy, money, their lives into certain areas of quote-unquote science, and they're really, it's like the ultimate Stockholm syndrome right there. These people will go to bat to protect the status quo of what they think is knowledge, what they think is the right information, true information. But hey, proof is on the paper. It all came crashing down with this guy because I asked him, I showed him A, which he agreed with, I showed him B, which he agreed with, and I told him to add it up. When he put the equal sign down and he did the equations, he just couldn't go there. It all came crashing down. It all started with me when I got a master's in education, Drexel University, and after school I went to get the job, and I took the test, and I actually did really well on the test. They gave me the mentally gifted teaching job. I'm not tooting my own horn, even though it sounds like it, but the point is I was teaching these subjects, and suddenly I had to really look into it. But as a 24-year-old, somebody who could actually process information that we first got when we were 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, we questioned it, but we weren't really allowed to question it. And we didn't have the cognitive abilities or the information at that point to challenge what we were being taught. But here I was 24, and I was now supposed to teach it to other kids. And I was looking into these things, and it wasn't adding up. So it started sort of, the whole paradigm started breaking down then for me. But I hadn't invested much in it at that point, and I hadn't invested much time, so I really didn't have a problem dismantling it all, picking the lock, taking the chains off of this bogus information. But anyhow, that's math, and here's math. The jet fuel hoax, I'm going to use the A380 Airbus as a perfect example. They tell you the statistics for this plane, the specs say that it has maximum fuel capacity of 85,000 gallons. And that the fuel tanks on the schematics are in the wings, right? And that the wings themselves are holding up these massive Rolls-Royce engines. Those things weigh 13,000 pounds apiece. Okay, so you got 26,000 in that, and then the mass of that much fuel, which looks like this. That much fuel looks like this when you see it. The size of it, that's the mass of it. Looks like that. 85,000 gallons. It's about 300,000 pounds, right? So half that, it's 175,000 pounds, which would be represented by this much weight on those wings, right? That are dealing with all the stresses of flying, with the 70,000 pounds of thrust coming out of those 150,000 pounds, the two of them coming out, the stresses of landing, flying, storms, all that stuff. So when I look at those planes and I think about the wings just being tanks, I actually think instead what I would think would be in the wings is a bunch of scaffolding and a bunch of bracing to deal with all those weights and all those pressures. And so when you do look inside the wing, that's what you get. That's what it is a bunch of scaffolding. All right, so there's some fuel in these planes, and these engines are using some fuel, but there's just no way it's using 85,000 gallons of jet fuel. So apparently, and this is how the hoax goes, apparently these turbine engines, what they're doing is they're compressing air, and they compress it down. Each of those chambers, it gets, and these engines are just carved out of a single block. That's how strong they have to be. This isn't combustion technology. This looks nothing like a typical engine that runs, on a carbon fuel or whatever. And so it's compressing it down harder and harder and harder. And when you get to the point where it's super compressed at the end, the tiniest amount of fuel, I don't even know if you need fuel after firing them up. But once they get going and they've compressed that air, apparently when air gets compressed to that point, it's straight up flammable on its own. Which kind of makes sense with the oxygen, and I really don't know about the specs on that. I only know that the math doesn't work, okay? I don't know the specifics on how those engines are working, but I know that the math doesn't work, and I know it's par for the course for the elite to be lying to us about that, because they can charge us X amount. Now apparently they've got these turbines are in power plants. What you're seeing is steam coming out of those big things, that they're just charging us for next to nothing. I mean, yeah, it costs money to build these things, but yeah, the weight that would go into one of those wings would take this crane, the biggest, baddest crane. It would take 16, at full capacity, what that crane can lift, 16 times. That much weight would be equal to those engines plus the 85,000 gallons of fuel in those. The numbers, once they get big, and that's kind of how the elite, they fool us with everything, is with just huge numbers, right? Light speed and evolution, it's millions and millions of years, and it's light years and galaxies far, far away, and your mind cannot deal with that stuff, and basically just shuts down. Says, well, I trust these people, I trust them, because people want to trust our leaders and the status quo. They don't want to think that people running the world are crazy. I mean, they worship their politicians, and they create this whole sense. They create this all the shenanigans, right? When if a president comes and visits a town, like, he could just helicopter right into where he's going, but no, they have him come to the outskirts of town, and they'll shut down all the highways, and like pregnant women can't even get to the hospital because they have to shut down all the highways and all the security, and it gives this sense of awe. It's the same as going through an airport with the TSA. They've never caught anybody. Yes, that stuff's there to keep control in case like shit did hit the fan, that they do want to be able to frisk everybody and whatnot. But what that really does, it puts us in a sense that we are absolutely controlled, right down to them just putting their hands all over you, patting you down everywhere. Or else you have to go into the machine there that's totally giving out bad frequencies. Bad for you. And if you opt out of it like I do, I mean, you get completely freaking molested. And you can't do anything about it, right? It's not gay if it's TSA though, right? Anyhow, so that's the jet fuel hoax. Yeah, one more thing, like that amount of fuel and the hose they stick on the wing, it would take 2 days to fill up a swimming pool with that kind of hose. And they stick that hose on for 15 minutes, 20 minutes in between flights. Tops. Who knows if they're even pumping that whole time. You also have the military jets. If you look at them, and those wings are just streamlined, and the body of the jet is the turbine engine, the whole body. And then you got the wing there. And I used to know this guy, and he flew these things, and he'd fly it from here, Colorado, to Kuwait, non-stop. And I know that sometimes they refuel in air, and I'm not saying they don't use fuel. What I'm saying is that the math doesn't work. So you gotta look elsewhere. And there's a reason that Tesla, who Einstein called, they asked Einstein, who's the smartest man? They said, ask Tesla. They asked Tesla, what about Einstein? He said he's a beggar dressed up in royal clothing. What he meant by that was he was part of the establishment. They treated him like royalty because they were using him and his science to back their situation. The same in the medical industry. There was Rife and Louis Pasteur. And Louis Pasteur came up with the germ theory. Rife, who had a better microscope, was able to see and a better way of working. He could keep the cells alive longer. And what his conclusion was, wait a minute, a healthy cell is impervious to disease, absolutely immune to disease. Which would only, if they built a medical system out of that, it would just be a bunch of eating good food, right? But the other side, we could focus on germs, we could make people sick, we could create a whole hospital system and treat illness, treat disease. So, yeah, you got these guys every day, like Hutchinson's, this Canadian guy, the Hutchinson effect, look that up. There's people all the time who are inventors coming out with free energy type platforms, and they say that there's a knock on the door and there's an offer, X amount of dollars for this, and when they buy it, they will put it, they're lucky enough just to get an offer. They buy it, and then the corporations will put that in the bottom drawer and keep pumping the fuel, keep selling us on carbon fuels and whatnot. With the jet engine, though, they're not even using that. But anyhow, they just don't want us to have all these excellent inventions, and they're going to do what they have to keep it down, keep the truth down. They hoard the truth, they use the truth like a form of currency. That's one of my favorite quotes, that the elite hoard the truth and use it like a form of currency against us. And that is the truth. All right. Peace.